Hey, good people. I hope that this finds you having a wonderful day in spite of, and maybe because of everything that is going on in the world. I want to welcome you to our second installment of the Young Professionals Virtual Coffee Chat. I want to start with a moment of gratitude, acknowledging that many people came to this conversation because of our focus on mental health and joy, and because there's so much tragedy happening in the world. I just want to say thank you for everybody who thought it important to join us, and in particular, to my friend and co-host Suzette Robotham, as well as to our special guest, Dr. L. Tony Lewis. I'm going to turn it over to Suzette to tell you a bit about how we came to creating this space and an opportunity that we presented to the community for those of you who want to take advantage of it.
Everybody. Conversation with a friend earlier. She's actually based in Dublin, about how long we've been in lockdown. And so we were joking about who's been on lockdown longer. And I think that I want to stop referring to this as lockdown. A little bit of an echo. Can y'all hear me okay?
Yes, Fran.
Okay, because it was the echo. And now my screen has gone away. So technology never a dull moment. But nevertheless, I want to stop calling it a lockdown because I actually appreciate the opportunity to be still, to be building connections in really different ways, and to just be at peace with, like, there's a lot going on around us, a lot of tragedy, but also a lot of growth and opportunity to continue to think about what might be next for you. What haven't you done in a long time? For me, I haven't had to do anything to my own eyebrows in a very long time. So that's why I haven't I don't need y'all to see my arch. It's not quite what it's supposed to be. But really regrounding us and getting us to hit a reset. And so this idea was born from a couple of ideas. One, DJ Kamish, who is our good friend and DJ, I was just really trying to think about how he rebranded himself in a space where he wasn't able to do events. And I was like, you just need to do quick breaks. You know, Club Quarantine is already branded to another DJ. What can your own specific lane be? And then started talking to David about other ways and spaces we could be quickly creating spaces for people to engage, because reality is y'all are zoomed out. I currently have the blessing of being on leave from work, given a personal loss I had in December, and so have been on pause a lot longer than a lot of other people, but wanted to make sure that we were also creating spaces and opportunity for people to create. And so really quickly, before we dive into our conversation with Dr. Tony, who I'm also excited to meet and talk to as well. And another thing that we launched last week was a community survey called a Give Get survey. And essentially what have people, and you can type into the box, and when you type, make sure that it says all panelists and all attendees so that the room can see. Has anybody, and if you were here last week, you've already done it, so we know that you've done it, but has anybody ever had an opportunity before in a workspace to do a Give Get exercise? Stacy, yes. Brittany, yes. Or I don't know if y'all are saying yes, y'all can hear me or not. Des, no. But essentially what a Give Get is it's beginning to bring structures into community where people are both givers of their resources, of their assets, of their expertise, of their experience, of their skills, and then giving people an opportunity to talk a little bit more about what it is that they need in order to thrive and grow. We saw a great response from it last week. We had about 50 folks already complete the document. We'll also chat the survey, but essentially what this survey is, as it loads, is an opportunity for you to tell us who you are, tell us where you're from, tell us how to get in contact with you, tell us what your business and industry is, what your current role is, number of years of experience. But the most important part of this form are the questions around, one, what do you bring to a community of young professionals, right? And I had a really great question come to me by email over the weekend about this question, because a lot of people, especially like at the time when I was like, I don't have anything to offer, you actually all have immense well springs of things to offer folks. And so would tell you to like pause and really think about your passion, what you get excited about, what your skill sets are, what you enjoy doing when you're completing that part of the questionnaire. But then the second part that is equally as important is like, what do you need from the community, right? So for me, to give an example, what I bring to a community is the fact that I do career coaching, especially for mid to senior level professionals, right? But what I would need from the community is a clientele. So think about it in essence of like, here's the thing that I need. And it doesn't have to equivocate, right? You could be like, hey, I am a software engineer that knows how to code, but I actually want to go back to school to do like interior design, and so need some support with thinking that through. So don't think it has to be like a zero sum game in terms of things that you need versus things that you give back to this document. So I wanted to spend a little time there as you're thinking about it. And then how do people find you on the web? Is it Instagram? Is it LinkedIn? Do you have a website? And last but importantly, most important to me actually in this document is you have to opt in for your information to be shared in the document. So people that are currently in the community know I have locked this document down to the point where you can't even forward the email in which they got the document. And that's because you are having access to people's names and email addresses, and we don't want it to become spammy, but we also want to respect the rights and the information of the people that are participating. And so in order to actually have your information shared in the community Give Get Doc, you have to opt in. Again, the only people that have access to this survey are people that complete the survey. And so we'll continue to update that as we go, and I'll add that into the chat room as well. And so going back to, let's see, I can't see my screen. David, I can't go back to my screen for some reason right now. My computer is acting wonky with me. But anyway, nevertheless, what I do want to do really quickly is the exercise that we did last week, and we'll take 1 more minute of time to do it, is please make sure that you set the chat function to all attendees and all panelists. And just want to take a moment to ground ourselves in gratitude, because again, expressing gratitude both for where we've been, what we have, but also in advance of what's to come is a really important practice to me and for me. And so just also want to create that space before we jump in with Dr. Tony. And so if everybody would take a second just to type to us what you're grateful for, we'll start our conversation in a second.
You should join us on Zoom for a chat that we're having with Dr. Tony about guarding your joy during a crisis. You can swipe up in my stories and jump in right now. Suzette just talked about a Give Get survey, which is a way that we're trying to establish and support community virtually. And then ask the question, what are you grateful for? We're about to start the chat now. Heidi says friends, family, and her health, because I can do anything I strive to do with those things. Sound. Stacey says grateful for life. Sherry says remaining connected to my tribe. Kim Hayes, my friend, says my family and my health. Kayla says my friends and my family. Turquoise, a good friend, says that she's grateful to still be employed and working from home. Amen to that. Dr. Tony, I want to invite you into this conversation. Ask you to unmute your, there you go. Ask you the same question, what are you grateful for? And then I also just want to underscore that there are so many of us who are grappling with things that we might not have been grappling with 30 days ago or 2 months ago. I had just this morning 2 conversations with people that have lost loved ones due to COVID. Last night I read messages from people in my extended village on Facebook, one in particular losing his father to COVID, so there's a lot of grief. And we're also without the traditional ways of working through our grief together. People are dealing with anxiety, of stress, financial insecurities, food insecurities. What are the things that you're saying to the people that you work with? For those who don't know, Dr. Tony is founded Liberation Health Strategies. She's a licensed physician as well as a healer. She does amazing work throughout the country to support the holistic wellness of all people, but in particular people of color. What are the things that you're saying to people around guarding their joy? And then similarly, can you share your practices? What are the things that you're doing to guard and protect your joy to the extent that those things might be different?
No, thank you so much for having me today. Such an important conversation. And yeah, all those things, right? Because that's kind of the daily rhythm right now, or the hourly rhythm, whether it's looking on Facebook or the phone calls you get or the text, or the fact that like, so I'm in Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn, and I've got sirens constantly, you know? And it's like, and every time I hear a siren, especially if it's on my block, I'm thinking who that is, you know what I mean? Whose house is that? So, you know, but I'm gonna start with Suzette's beautiful kind of gratitude moment piece. So I am super grateful for music. to help me work through all of those things, whether I need to boo-hoo cry, get mad about an ex, you know, think about falling in love, or, you know, take myself back to like high school, college dance floors and stuff. I'm grateful for like that ability to work through all of the emotions, because like for real, as you all said earlier, you know, be gentle with yourself, because it's a pandemic out here. So, you know, I've had people apologize for like having anxiety attacks and panic attacks and feeling less than. And I'm like, yo, like, congrats that your nervous system is tuned into all of this that's happening. And that's going to show up in all the different ways. But, you know, that's kind of the way it shows up even in our art, in our film, in our anime, like, you know, that there's something inside of you that just gets on fire when there's a big thing that's happened, right? You know, so I think thinking of like the way those emotions set, whether it's in your sleep or your appetite or your mood or your productivity, you know, or all of those things as like your body, your soul, and your spirit reacting to the bigness of this moment and the fact that like it's not right. You know what I mean? And people close to us are dying. Like there is like legit fight or flight reasons out here. Just know that like every moment you can just sit with your body and be like, thank you for letting me know. And like, let me just take a second to breathe and love up on all of the parts that are feeling that kind of way, and not forcing it. Because I think sometimes we want to run through the grief to get back to protectivity, you know, feel guilty about joy, because why should I feel joyous when people, you know, have lost somebody? But, you know, joy is kind of like our medicine, right? Like joy has been our medicine for thousands of years. I mean, since we first appeared on this plane, that like the ability to find joy, like whether it's in the music or in your food or in your cup, you know, or in the way the birds are singing outside, you know, because they are tripping, you know, out here. I had a woodpecker in my backyard, you know, but like just like when Suzette was talking about you all have something, you know what I mean? Like even if you just take a moment every day to think about the last time you really felt like that good joy, that joy that like took you out of whatever it was you're processing in your brain and into like that, like, what, you know what I mean? That kind of thing, like find that moment, even if it was 10 years ago, you know, because even if we think about, you know, the intersection of grief and joy, which is challenging, but, you know, you think about like the second line, right? Like the second line in New Orleans where folks move from the dirge, which is that close, like that slow kind of like, oh my God, like I'm doing the, you know, Alvin Ailey Negro spiritual revelations, like I'm down on the ground kind of thing. But then it's like, wait, let me celebrate a life, you know, let me honor that piece. So I think if there's like big buckets to this, it's like, think of your joy as medicine that you should protect, that you have to have some piece of every day. Don't force it, because like if you need to feel all the feels, roll around snotty and cry, do that. Because I know many of you have probably had the experience of trying to put that in a corner and then it shows up like some other time when you least expect it, you know? So process all the feels, but really think of your joy as maybe like your secret weapon, as your thing, as your medicine that lets your body, like every cell in your body know that like you've got something for it, you know? That it's not just about the fear, it's about the beauty.
Yeah, I hear you underscoring the value of literally guarding our joy. And then also highlighting to Suzette's point about DJ Kamish creating a playlist for us. I've heard all of my physician friends talk about the importance of not only listening to music, especially for those of us connected to the diaspora, but also moving and finding ways to allow our bodies to respond to what's going on. Suzette, do you have a question?
I had two things. So we don't lose track of your questions in the chat. I just want to remind everyone that's participating to use the QA. So you should have access to the Q&A function at the bottom so that we can make sure as you have questions for Dr. Troney, we're able to make sure that you're also looped into the conversation. But Dr. Troney, I guess for me, I think that I had a moment of, right, as somebody that very transparently has been in a grieving process, right? So losing a parent is the most traumatic thing probably that will happen in anyone's life. But recently, the Harvard Business Review came out with an article that explicitly named that what we as a country and as a world, as a global community is going through is grief. Right? I think what became very important in that moment for me is the fact that we're actually calling it a thing. And I guess maybe in the process, and the thing that I love about even like how you like came into the space is you began calling things. So you named it fear, you named it joy, you named it grief. How significant is naming and being able to articulate what we feel and beginning to move to a place of joy?
It's so significant. At first, let me just, let's all just take a moment of breath for you being vulnerable and talking about what you've been through, because you've mentioned it a couple times. I want everybody to take just a deep breath and breathe out and throw some love and light and energy towards Suzette, for saying that. I just want to know I hear you and I see you. Hard stop. Yeah, so it's really important to name it, right? Because sometimes it's swirling around in your head, in your body, in different spaces, but you're kind of like, what is this? Why am I? What's happening? But like the more you can name it, you can kind of start to figure out how to address it and redirect energy that may not be serving you. Now, like, so, if you are feeling some kind of fear and you don't necessarily see the threat because it's dark outside or whatever, you may be like, what's going on? But like the minute that light comes on and you're like, oh, there's a lion to my right. Maybe I'm going to my left, or that's my ex coming at me this way. I'm gonna go the other way, or I'm gonna block those things. I'm talking about my ex a lot. That's a whole situation. That's another coffee chat, right, David? But like,
relationships are at the end of
look,
the
can we talk about relationships in these streets? That's a whole situation. That's a whole situation of grief. But like, sometimes like, so I got like all these receipts where I can do, everything from deliver babies to, teach you yoga to whatever. But like a lot of times, like the most healing thing is for folks to kind of get either on the phone or in a circle and just share what's happening and then come up with some language that's like, oh, really, you too? Oh, that's a thing. And that can start to, again, figure out what it is so you can redirect it. Do you know what I'm saying? So yeah, it's key. It's really key. And like, even if you're left brain and you got to start looking up different things, you can look up stages of grief and you can figure out what stage are you in terms of grieving the loss of your movement outside of your house, or grieving the potential loss of the plan you thought you had for 2020, or grieving whatever it is, and be like, am I at anger? Am I at acceptance? And you can go through all of those different pieces of grief every day. But again, yeah, language, naming things, right?
And I want to jump back in real quick because the X thing is significant, and we will have a conversation about relationships and quarantine and show at the end of the month with Janice Cage and Paul Brinson. But I think something that people do in times of doubt or grief is go back to old, some bad habits.
Look at your face. Like they had X for a reason.
Old text messages, right? And so sometimes in seeking familiarity in an unfamiliar time.
Stop texting, David. No, just kidding. Go ahead.
I was closing out the text messages from the boat.
Back in a bad habit, as my husband Maxwell said. How do you navigate not going back to what is familiar in times like this in the name of protecting your joy?
Yeah, I think like sitting quiet with it, because like you at some level that like maybe it's not a good thing to send that text or do that call, or maybe it's because if you sit really quiet with yourself, like you'll have this kind of dialogue. Or if you call one of your people who walk with you through that space, they may help to remind you. So sometimes it's just a little bit of sitting quiet so that like you can be really clear on how you're doing and what you need, and really set it in like the present of the present. So I've had people who are everywhere from, oh my God, I am sheltering in place by myself. Is that because I messed up all my relationships before? I focused on my career. Let me go back over the Rolodex. But like, back to that whole be gentle with yourself thing. One, look, I've sent out a couple of texts myself. I ain't gonna lie. Like, don't be too hard on yourself if you do send out one or two. Just try to get with yourself quiet every day and be like, what's this really about? Is this really one of those stages of grief? Is this really something that I may be exploring my forgiveness or my letting go or my growth? Or is this me letting back in toxicity that I already said I was done with, So if you get quiet with yourself and check in with your people, they'll help you through that. But like, don't, I think have you seen that graphic that's like, okay, so in this thing, I'm gonna learn how to lose weight and I'm gonna be perfect. I'm gonna learn to do things. It's like, nope, I'm just gonna breathe and come out of this alive.
Absolutely.
For real, like sit with yourself and be easy with it. Like, don't be too hard on yourself. But if you think about it in the stages of grief piece and what it is you actually need, like usually we all kind of know something. Either it's work we need to do or it's a thing we've already litigated. So I'm gonna try to shorten my answers a little bit, David, so we can get more in. So feel free to just be like.
You're good. This is why we're here, and want to again encourage people who have questions to add them into the chat. The thing that I'm struggling with is not taking for granted, one, how difficult this is.
Yeah.
Right. Like sitting and being honest with yourself. Like sometimes just being still. I think about the first time I had a physical response to not being allowed to be busy because I was in a different place, like literally in a jungle.
Yeah.
And most people know that I taught kindergarten. And so it's a two-part question, which is for people who have not had the luxury of therapy,
yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Where do they go? How do they start? Are there podcasts, books, places where you would suggest they learn not only some of this language, but some of these practices that you're talking about?
Mm-hmm.
And then related to that, I talk a lot now about in addition to the economic crisis and the health crisis that most people are talking about, I worry about the mental health crisis in our communities. Paul Brunson, who will join us at the end of the month, has talked a lot about the increase in domestic violence.
Mm-hmm.
My organization, NBJC, does a lot of work around mental health. And I talk to a number of Black LGBTQIA youth who are now feeling unsafe because they're home. And so I also want you to talk to those who have children who are responsible for the learning and development of young people. What would you say to them about protecting the joy of our babies at this time?
Mm-hmm. So I'm gonna do that in a couple blocks. Like one is the kind of where do you find it, even if you don't have like your therapist on speed dial. And I think, first kind of, start with kind of inventorying who are your people, right? Because even the Black therapists we have out there, are a little bit swamped, right? And like nobody knows you like you and your people that have known you for a long time, right? So start with kind of just that exchange of like, the exchange of ideas, of feelings, of what's going on. I know like a couple of us that own businesses or that are entrepreneurs, we kind of just started doing like a call that had no agenda. That's like, what's going on with your family, with your husband, with your children, with your, all the things, and then with my family who's in rural Southern Illinois that doesn't do anybody's therapy, nobody's whatever. It's kind of like, so where's your release, And look at stuff like I saw Jennifer popped up Therapy for Black Girls, one of my favorites, in terms of podcasts and different resources. There's all sorts of kind of Black wellness organizations that are popping up around the Black yoga folks. There's some more resources that I will definitely add in there. And, one of the things that I actually love when we transition into talking about how we all cope is, so we have this amazing Black woman leader out in California, Dr. Nadine Burke Harris, who some of you all may have known, did the TED Talk on ACEs and adverse childhood experiences. And she just put out a resource actually on her page, which I can cast or I can send the link. But like there's actually a couple of PDFs on coping with and managing stress in the crisis for adults, and then for caregivers and for children. And I think that's like a wonderful resource. You can also go to my Facebook page, Liberation Health Strategies, where a lot of times I will pile on stuff that I love, from like music meditations. RZA actually has a dope meditation out now. And a couple of things, there's great work that mixes art, but like you can definitely go there. The last thing that I'm gonna say is for those of us that are kind of have the privilege and responsibility and receipts or calling to kind of have access to be able to help in this moment, you know what I mean? Whether you're working with children, working with politics and civic engagement, public health, essential workers, like this idea of compassion fatigue, or even survivor's guilt, of what it means to wake up every day knowing that you can actually make a phone call and move something. But that also can put you at risk for additional stress. I would say check out the Compassion Fatigue Awareness Project. and, you know, look at like that list of things just to check yourself on a daily basis in terms of where you are in terms of burnout and stress. So I hope those things are kind of helpful. I can share my screen to show a couple of the resources. Would you like me to do that or no?
Yes, please.
That's sure. Yeah, so here's so the one that I actually wanted to show was, so this is actually, I like sometimes articles with the resources embedded in. And so this article actually has a very kind of easy name, like it's not just in your head, right? And mental health guides for coping with, you know, coronavirus. And so I'll put this link like in the in our chat box. But if you scroll down to the middle of the article, you'll see that there's actually two kind of big documents, one for stress relief during COVID and one very specifically for caregivers and kids during COVID. And this is led by, again, the sister Nadine Burke Harris, who's Surgeon General out in California. So I like that particular thing. The other thing that I mentioned was this compassionfatigue.org. And this is like caring for yourself in the face of difficult work, which, like, let's be real, like I think almost all work is difficult work right now, you know, no matter what you do, even if you're on Zoom like 24 hours a day or worried about your work or don't have work, like there's just something, or if you're trying to figure out the homeschooling and like, oh my God, maybe the teachers were right about my kids, you know, all of those things. Shout out, you know, so moment of silence, prayers, and shout out for all the teachers, thebomb.com, David, yes.
That's
but,
right.
This compassion fatigue kind of, this work, this website, this group of stuff I've used for years and working with caregivers and folks who are at the front lines of really trying to figure out how we can change things. So I would say definitely, you know, go to this resource, and I'll put that in the chat as well.
Perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Before we land the plane, just checking to see if there are any other questions that have come up. I don't think I see any. I do want to acknowledge, while I have both of you here as an unapologetic Black feminist, and you also acknowledge the medical professional, the sister in California, that I'm just thankful for Black women. Most of the things that are great in the world are a result of Black women. So I just want to say thank you to both of you. Suzette, I will invite you rather to ask the last question and to take us home.
If you're on mute.
You got to unmute yourself, sis. Unmute.
Thank you. I also want to thank you as a Black man, David, because I think in the mental health space in particular, Black men are last and least, and most likely to be, unfortunately, the bearers of comorbidities that lead to end of life. So just also want to say Black men are just as susceptible to all of the things that Black women are, but not always given space and place to talk about it. So to you, thank you, but to the Black men that are here and giving themselves the space and opportunity to hear and get resources, thank you to you all as well. I actually want to know, I know that we are almost at time. We have 50 people in attendance with us, and I just don't believe that none of y'all have questions. And I know that, you know, vulnerability, authenticity are my thing, but I'm going to encourage you all to be bold and brave in this space. Like we talk about naming a thing, if you have something that you're going through, or even if you're just processing, like, you know, like I'm coronavirus out, like I could not read one more article about coronavirus and be, but know that I still need to be aware. Like if you're at that place, if you have a question, now is kind of the time for you. And I think I see a hand raised. I don't know if it's still a hand from earlier. I don't want you to walk away from like, I had an opportunity to ask Dr. Tony a question and didn't. Go ahead, Vanessa.
Vanessa, you got to unmute yourself, sis. We saw your hand raised earlier. Let's see if I can assist with that. No, she's still muted.
I don't know if we can unmute her.
There you. Nope. Vanessa, if you can unmute yourself, you can ask your question directly. Let's see if anyone else has a question while we work on that.
I'm gonna drop in like two things, you know, because I think we touched on grief and loss a little bit. So it's so challenging to not be able to go be with our people in person. I've seen folks kind of, you know, find ways to get on the phone with groups of folks, whether it's a Zoom call or just a conference call, you know, or find ways to memorialize people in their homes just to share that, because that's a really hard thing to deal with. So I want to say, find different ways to honor and just to really cry kind of in your quiet space, because that's the thing. And talk to folks, and also be okay with not talking to folks. I've had a bunch of folks who felt like they had to explain it, and they were like, I just need to sit with my grief of losing this, because I don't need people going through the was it because of COVID kind of conversation. I just need to deal with the fact that I lost my sister. You know what I'm saying? Or I lost my brother. The other thing is, I saw a thing the other day that was like, this is an opportunity to kind of reprogram this situation where this society has been really good and fine with us running ourselves into the ground for 400 years. So like anything we can do right in this moment to like reset that vibe of neglect and abuse on our bodies, do it.
Yeah.
I see two people up here.
Yeah, Mr. J, Lock 3, do you want to ask your question directly? If you unmute yourself, there you go. Nope, you had it for a second. Unmute again. And then we have 2 questions that were submitted as well. Are there any free resources right now for mental health services or testing for mental disorders that you know
There's a
of?
bunch of various screening tools. Like if you are concerned about depression, you can look up different, you can just actually Google that. But I think like a lot of the stuff, and this is one of the things I like to tell everybody about this moment, like the reason they call it like the novel coronavirus is because this is newish, right? So like you'll see stuff that sometimes may not even be relevant to what we're doing. So just, kind of again, sit with yourself, talk with people, look at those resources that I listed earlier, and kind of just keep digging, keep asking around, because we're having to create stuff in real time for this crazy historic moment. And just whatever you like feel a little bit out of it, just be like, oh right, pandemic, right? So now if you need, there is and Suzette, maybe you could throw these numbers up. There is the National Suicide Prevention Hotline. Like if you feel like you can't slow that voice down, and I believe there's some resources on your website as well, David. If you feel like in your quiet, you can't slow that voice down and it's spinning and you are not functioning, feel free to call one of those numbers. You can check, when you're kind of in quiet space to see what that number is for your city. But like that way you can talk to maybe a hotline or a professional to see if there's like another level of stuff you need to do.
Yeah, I'll add it as well to the chat. There's a text line that people can access generally. And then they're also for people who might have the double gifts and double burdens of being Black and LGBTQIA or same gender. There's also the Trevor Project is one specific to young people. But there are resources on our website that I just typed into the chat as well. Mr. J, want to invite you again if you can unlock your mic to ask your question.
Thank you for that.
Can we unmute you? Because I think we're battling to unmute you and see if that works.
While we're doing that, I want to, I know we're at 3:34.
Hey, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yep, go for it.
Okay. Yeah, I had some difficulty. So I have been watching ESPN and Fox Sports morning shows where they're constantly talking about when they should bring sports, and there's been analysts that suggest one thing such as having baseball being played in Arizona or LA. And do you guys believe that for bringing back sports, as long as they do it in a safe manner, would help bring people back together, just like how they brought sports back after 9/11 right after 9/11 happened?
So that's a very good question, because I mean, a lot of us are missing like the connection of our sports, of our concerts and things. The only challenge is like this Rona thing, like it straight comes for your chest when we get in close spaces. So even though there are indications that in some spaces it may not deal well with warmer weather, that maybe by the time we get to those seasons it might be petering out. The truth is we don't know, because the longer we stay in this space where we're continuing to, and I like to say physically distance versus social and spiritually distance, because I'm never gonna socially and spiritually connect for my people. But like this thing where there are still groups of folks getting together physically. the virus has a chance to like thrive and continue to spread. So I would say like we would need to see a significant backdrop of that and find maybe other ways to enjoy sport, because I think the risk at that point would be like too great, and no one, you know, neither the sports teams nor the folks who are working in the areas nor the essential workers who are going to be worn out by the time we get to these seasons wants to have like another pop, you know, in our head, another, you know, curve. So, but it's a good question, and I think we should be thinking about all the different things we can do worldwide.
Dr. Tony Ayers asking, how do we deal with family that spends most of their time constantly discussing the negative outcomes associated with this pandemic? Are there any suggestions for engaging in conversation on a lighter note or otherwise responding to people that are resting in the terror?
Yeah, that's a challenging thing. And you know, boy, family is kind of a situation. You always have that aunt, uncle, cousin, brother. There's someone who is actually a little bit stuck in the grief and trying to process it a bit, you know? And so if you can find ways to set boundaries with yourself, because again, kind of changing the behavior of others, you know, may be difficult, right? But like you can start with yourself in terms of limiting the times of day that you actually engage in these conversations. Now, that can be hard, you know, because I actually even told my mom, I'm like, look, both your children are in New York. It's rough out here. You know, if you get a call from us, you should pick up the phone, you know, just because we're here and no telling what could be happening. So there's a little bit of that piece. The other thing you can do is like this whole grounding yourself and getting ready for the conversation when you know it's coming. Like before you pick up that phone, before you engage in a conversation, if you can just kind of take a couple deep breaths and be like, okay, I know they're getting ready to talk about XYZQ, you know, let's, you know, do that. If your family is open for kind of figuring out solutions, like let's be real, like stressing the virus or any type of stress is a way to kind of divert the resources your body may need to fight anything or to relax. So like COVID is so strong that like if it gets in your body, and you've seen this because we've all experienced it, you know, just in our loved ones and in our circles in terms of how many people are lost. Once it gets deep in your lungs, like that's where it likes to get at you, right? Like your lungs, the chest pain. That's why they keep talking about the vents and all of these other things. And so the thing that you can do, if you can keep your body calm, relaxed, you know, that helps to build up your immune system. That helps to make you stronger for the fight should it come. It helps you to notice things should they come. And so you can talk to your family about, you know, it actually being a good thing for your health, for your whole body health, to talk about things other than COVID. You know what I mean? Let's not let it seep into ourselves and take over our lives and our stress by talking about it all the time. Can we just do that maybe once a day or once a week, and can we talk about something else?
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So Dr. Tony, we have two more questions for you, and just to acknowledge that we've gone over time, but I don't think mental health in particular is something that we can or should run. So thank you for
Agreed.
and thanks for those that have been able to stay in your patience with this.
My pleasure.
Next question, actually an anonymous question, but an important one. I've never had a therapist, but had planned on getting one prior to the outbreak. What are some suggestions you could share for seeking a therapist now that we are in this pandemic? I sense it might be harder to find one now. Should I wait until things return to normal?
You know, I am all about building up the team. You know, I am all about building up the team. So like, you know, I would say, you know, you can do your research. Again, I like Therapy for Black Girls. I know Kevin Dedner is doing like, there's, what is Kevin's thing that he does, David, the name of that? The Men's Health.
I know what you're talking about. I need to look it up.
Yeah, look it up. Thank you. Yeah, anyway, so there are a couple of, but really, even amongst my folks, and I have like a close circle of folks that I use, that I make sure I want to know that you understand me as a Black woman, that you understand, you know, anti-Blackness in society and all these different things. Everyone's trying to figure out like how they're going to go to virtual, how they can serve more people, and also how they take care of themselves. So I would say, you know, again, start with kind of looking at all of the different folks that are kind of in your wellness circle. So yes, think about a therapist, but you know, you could actually look up online, for, Black therapists in your area, therapists that specialize in LGBTQIA. I don't know if you have that resource that I sent you earlier, David. That was that particular list of, the therapists that were that are very good with our community. But also think about like the folks who are like, run the wellness centers in your area, the folks who are doing the yoga, who can do some meditation, the folks who are, kind of doing dance, who have the herbs, who are your naturopath doctors. Like think a little bit outside of the kind of Western medicine box in terms of the people that can support your mind, body, and spirit in this time. But yeah, you don't have to, but no, you do not have to wait until post-COVID to find somebody.
I also want to add, I'm not sure
Mm-hmm.
the person that sent that. I think as a community, we underutilize if you are currently employed with blessing our EAP programs. But for instance, I actually through work am a part of a program called Lyra, where I found a Black therapist. But a lot of folks, quite honestly, don't know that. And I get 25 free sessions a year, again, of blessing. But it's because I'm leveraging my EAP program. And so sometimes your company employee assistance program, I'll stop speaking in acronyms, sorry about that, or in abbreviations, will have resources that will be super helpful in a space where it's like, oh, I don't know if I can find a therapist, and they have like lists of folks. Now it is a little bit challenging, I think, especially for instance with Lyra, to find Black therapists, but I know that Lyra, for instance, has a commitment to finding more local Black therapists around the country for folks. So I'd also suggest maybe looking there.
Yeah, that's I like that because it actually goes back to the beginning, right? Like mind your resources, right? Like check the areas, like if you, whether it's insurance or it's something that your city's, setting out to be like, so, New York has NYC Well. Yes, to the Brooklyn folks who do Heal House are my people. Minka, Brooklyn is my people. Life Wellness are my people. Those are all folks that are doing online things. Thank you for those shout outs in the box. But yeah, like, kind of look at all of your stuff. Anybody who's doing telemedicine or any city, NYC, wherever your city is, they're trying to get ahead of this a little bit, hopefully. So yeah, inventory.
Awesome. And then last, and I'm sadly, we might have needed to make this one like 2 hours, Dr. Johnny. Last but most certainly not least, are there any resources or groups for women to join to seek mental support? And do you have any advice for Black business owners with lack of resources currently?
Ooh, Black business owners, that's a whole other coffee chat. So, it's so interesting for us, right? Because on a regular day, it feels like the resources, there's a lot of kind of hypervigilance in terms of, the applications, the paperwork, and all of those things. I think, I know there've been a lot of Black entrepreneurs who have gotten together to look and to litigate kind of the SBA loan program stuff that's out there. I don't know anyone who's seen any money yet, or seen any movement yet. Not surprised there, but I also know, like in New York, it's like the David Prize, if you're running a nonprofit, Robert Wood Johnson Foundation is throwing out some resources. There are a couple of funds that are set up for artists and creatives, and like, it seems like there's something new popping up every day. But, I like that the kind of the splash at the front of this talked about building community in this context. And really it is kind of, it's a little bit of crowdsourcing, right? To kind of just kind of get together and see what works best for us. And then there's also the idea of, I love kind of checking out these small businesses that exist in my community in terms of, like, I know most of the restaurant owners, most of the sewers, most of the wellness people, and we're in constant conversation on WhatsApp groups or whatever about what resources pop up. So yeah, and check in with people on the business, but always leave a little space at the front to be like, are you all right? You know what I'm saying? Because they may come with the whole, my bill aren't getting paid, but it may actually be so much more. So I think it's another opportunity for us to share on our mental health. Mm-hmm.
Someone just flagged, I am trying to testing out technology, and I'm also on my Instagram Live. And someone mentioned as a nurse, thank you, I think that's Jean, said if you're a nurse and or if you're in the medical field and have an $11.99 for insurance, that they're offering over the phone and FaceTime therapy sessions. And so just want to underscore the point of minding your resources, especially if you're on the front line of responding to COVID. And again, I'll use front lines and all capital letters because I'm not just talking about medical professionals.
So definite shout out to my labor fam, shout out to 1199, shout out to NISNA, shout out to SEIU nationally and the auto workers and all of them. There's actually, a brother, so I, spend a lot of time in labor leadership. There's a couple of resources online, actually international, like looking at global, like Black workers. There's one at Public Services International, which is kind of a set of resources for labor unions, which is kind of practices that labor unions are using all over the globe to support their workers. And so where we're looking at kind of what worker fatigue is, especially if you're an essential worker, like definitely check it out. And hey, the power of the union, if they don't have it yet, make them get it, because that's the power of being a member, right?
That's right.
So much love to all the essential workers and all the families and all of you.
Well, Dr. Tony, first of all, I couldn't even, there are not enough words to express just immense gratitude and appreciation that we have for you. Because I have now a whole bunch of links. I'm gonna be all over your Facebook. So if you see like, that's me and probably everybody that's been a part of this chat, but also wanted to thank everyone that has joined us for this really important conversation. And something that you said that I wanna make sure that I give everybody as homework to do coming out of this is like, don't let good be the answer that you let people give you when they say, how are you? I'm actually that would prefer for you to skip the how are you doing if good is satisfactory. Like, people are not good right now. And so I've been personally pushing people in text, like, don't tell me good, like actually tell me how you are. Like, how are you and how are you feeling is a really important question right now. And if you don't have the space or the ability to respond right now, that's another thing. People how they are, because good actually is not the answer. Although it could be, but everybody's trying to get back to joy. And so with that, Dr. Tony, David, our guest, thank you so much for joining. Next Friday, we're back with DJ Kamish. I've also sent the link again for our community Give Get. Music is Healing. Kamish does a call every day at 10:30 and 2:30, every weekday actually, and he'll be with us next Friday. And then the following Friday in the month, we're talking about quarantine and chill, because Dr. Tony, I didn't forget that you was talking about texts and exes. So after the quarantine, I'm gonna walk around the corner in Bed-Stuy and come talk to you about who you was texting in your life. Y'all don't text your ex.
6 feet. No, I'm just kidding, stop.
I'm back, give me 50 feet exes in this quarantine. And with that, we thank you all very much. Enjoy your weekend and take care of yourselves, and more importantly, be gentle with yourselves. Bye, everybody.
A modern day matchmaker. He's one of the first Black men to become a certified matchmaker in the world. He hosts a television show, Dating with Celebs, in London, and it's just an all-around dope brother. So the two of them will join us to talk about relationships. But I encourage you to join us on Zoom or via my YouTube page, where I've been able to simulcast the Zoom conversation, just so you can participate in the chat and see the others who are engaging as well. I know that there are a lot of people who are on live because we got a lot of captive audience. A lot of people try to get stuff out, so I thank you for joining. and spending time with us. It's the most precious resource we have.